Yeah, so this area, Brett and Wendy Whiteley bought this property here and renovated it, and including building the tower up the left. Most of the other houses along to the right of that were also occupied by artists and like-minded people, and they started, if you like, doing things outside the fence, including putting some of their statues around. Brett, as everybody would know, died unfortunately, but Wendy is still living here. So Wendy started to do up this land here, which was basically a piece of railway land, and it was just basically buried in lantana and other weeds, and she gradually started to clean it up and got volunteers in to help her, and progressively they've turned it into a beautiful little oasis, and she and the volunteers are still maintaining that. North Sydney Council has sort of come in support. The railways, more or less against their better judgment, have said that they won't interfere with it at this stage. So basically it means that somebody else is looking after it and they're not paying for it. But it's actually turned into quite a lovely little oasis, and hopefully will stay that way. Yeah, and the community really appreciate it. I mean, not just the people who live on it, but all of the people in North Sydney talk with great appreciation about the effort that was put in to save this and turn it into a community asset. To me, this is an amazing thing with such an eclectic grouping of different styles of tables, chairs. They've used second-hand materials to make the walls, and they've got all sorts of found objects here. It's just a magic little example of how you can use rubbish and second-hand materials to make something that's really interesting and useful to the community.
William Blue, described in convict records as a Jamaican Negro sailor, was a labourer and chocolate maker in London. He was sentenced to 7 years transportation for the theft of raw sugar, but by the time he arrived in Sydney in 1801 he had less than 2 years left to serve. In 1805 he married Elizabeth Williams, a newly arrived English-born convict. Billy worked as a waterman and collected and sold oysters and other items. He was regarded favourably by government officials and the public, probably because of his whimsical style and pleasant banter. Governor Lachlan Macquarie was a regular user of the ferry services. He reported in his diary in 1817 that his wife and son were taken up the river to Parramatta in Blue's boat. In that same year, Macquarie granted Blue 80 acres at the southernmost tip of the north shore of Port Jackson, Billy Blue's Point. Now a landholder on the north side of the harbour, Blue saw the potential for operating a boat service to the site and quickly built up a fleet of ferries. Macquarie light-heartedly dubbed him Commodore. Edward Wollstonecraft and William Gore were landholders on the North Shore with vested interests in the harbour trade. In 1823 they attempted to oust Blue from both his land and his ferry service, alleging that he was a smuggler who also harboured escaped convicts. Blue responded by petitioning the governor, claiming that in view of his long and trusted service he should be granted in his old age the peaceable enjoyment of his premises and ferry. The governor found in his favour. In a style strikingly similar to that of Bungaree, Blue took to donning a travesty of a naval uniform replete with top hat, and as Commodore, would board incoming vessels to welcome the officers to Sydney. Blue died in 1834. Streets in North Sydney were named after him, and the site of his northern ferry terminus is known today as Blues Point.
That's what they told us.
Berry's Bay was given over to commercial and industrial use from the early 1800s, but even as late as 1878, Aboriginal people were still camping on its foreshore, people most likely displaced from the south coast of New South Wales. There was a similar group at Circular Quay, and those people, probably along with the Berry's Bay Aborigines, were relocated to La Perouse in the 1880s. In 1906, the New South Wales government acquired land from the estate of David Berry in exchange for agreeing to build and maintain a public hospital at the town of Berry on the south coast. These deep water frontages were considered suitable for industrial or commercial development and therefore likely to offset the costs incurred by building the hospital.
And up over there, there's steps that lead up to Commodore Road, which are called Henry Lawson steps, because Henry Lawson used to live in this area. Euroka Street, and somebody mentioned it, is just up and over under the railway line and on the other side of the railway line.
A railway line, built after the poet died in 1922, now cuts Euroka Street in two. But enough of Euroka and nearby Bank Streets survived to give a sense of the place in Henry's day. What has definitely gone are the sounds and sights of the old working class neighbourhood, those who lived and worked on or beside the waterway, in its boat yards and ferry depots and its timber yards and gasworks. It was with these people in mind that Lawson expressed his greatest outrage at the anticipated destruction of Ball's Head. In The Sacrifice of Ball's Head, written around 1916, Lawson was protesting against the leasing of part of the foreshore to a coal bunkering company. It is one of the earliest articulations of a conservation ethic and the needs of a community in Australia. They're taking it, the shipping push, as all the rest must go, the only spot of cliff and bush that harbour people know. The spirit of the past is dead. North Sydney has no soul. The state is cutting down Ball's Head to make a wharf for coal. The Ball's Head coal loader was built despite Lawson's objections. He died soon after in 1922, not living long enough to see the incoming Labor government create new public reserves at opposite ends of Ball's Head Bay. Premier Jack Lang opened the both in October 1926 with a speech on the need to protect public ownership of the harbour's foreshore. Curiously, Jack Lang was Henry Lawson's brother-in-law.
So we're walking along here on a track that is basically through very natural bushland, and yet we're only a kilometre or so from the centre of Australia's busiest city. So it's a magic spot to have actually been retained, and it's a minor miracle that it has been, but we've got everything that characterises the Australian bushland here. And this actually brings us now into the start of the coal loader property. And we can see it through the trees there. You can see a glimpse of cut stone. So this was a project built at the end of World War I, opened about 1919. And it was to enable ships to be coaled, because they used to burn coal in their boilers, obviously. So ships would, the 60 milers would come down from Newcastle with coal. It would be loaded up on top of this big platform that's a couple of 100 metres long, and then there's a jetty out the far end, and the coal would get loaded down into skips and taken out along the jetty and put into ships that were coming in to get coaled. There was a big gantry over the top that would lift the coal up and store it on the top, and then when it was needed it would come down through those openings into skips, be taken out along the jetty and dropped into the ship that wanted it. The skips used to come along underneath the chute. The chute would open, coal drops down into the skips. The skip would then go out through the tunnel, turn, go out along the jetty, and the coal from that would be down through a chute into the ships, and they'd fill up their bunkers for steaming.
This is of, I guess, a similar scale to the one near the coal loader, but showing up a little better in the afternoon sunshine here. One of the problems with these carvings is that part of the traditional way of using them was before a ceremony the elders would go in and re-groove the shape so that they would last for thousands of years. But of course, as soon as the traditions die out, then the carvings start to disappear with time, and so I think this one looks to me like somebody's gone in and re-picked it. Well, it might have been an Aboriginal person, but it doesn't look like normal. But you know, these are like the paintings in the caves that, unless they go back and retouch them and put new ochre on them, and so on, they disappear.
See the boomerang near the rock pool?
Yeah, and that little rock pool was probably where they sharpened axes. Yeah.
On the other side there's a groove right next to it.